All right, everybody, let's talk about Dead City Episode 2, which is called Another Shtty Lesson. I enjoyed this. I saw not so much, tons of TD symbols, but there was definitely some callbacks to, personalities. And, of course, there was a big music theme here. So let's just get right into it. The first thing we saw that I noticed that was very, very subtle, but, jumped out at me, was before the opening credits, what we see is Maggie and Jenny, and all the other people who came with them arriving at, Manhattan, but they haven't gone across the bay yet, across the river. And Maggie notices a boat that freaks her out. All right, so we'll get into why in a minute, but the very, very first image we see, actually, as they're arriving, is a walker who is dead. I mean, it's not moving, it's not animated, it's obviously been put down, and there is a bird's nest in the back of its head. You can see some broken shells, and I thought that was really interesting. It's a bird symbol, and we've seen this kind of thing a lot. I'm not entirely sure what it means or how to interpret it, but I think it may have to do with Hershel having left the nest, as it were, because what we actually see, we don't see any birds, but we see eggs that are like shells that are cracked and open as though the bird has hatched and left the nest. And I'm kind of thinking that was a foreshadow of Hershel showing up, that he left where she was, wanted him to stay. But we've seen this kind of a thing, the bird and the bird babies representing parents and children in The Walking Dead. If you remember, in one of the seasons of the flagship show, we saw this with Daryl. He looked up and he saw a bird. I think it was a bird in the nest and there were eggs in the nest, and that was kind of a foreshadow he was going to become a parent to Lydia. So we've definitely seen this kind of thing before, and I just thought it was interesting. The boat is actually a ferry. It's called Liberty Queen, which is a obvious Statue of Liberty reference. And yeah, the reason that it freaks Maggie out is because it's going to be really obvious that they're coming. And once again, I think this showcases how smart Maggie is. She is really good at strategy and figuring this sort of thing out. She's definitely not ignorant in this area. Anyway, just really interesting. So then it switches to Negan. And actually, first what we see are all the dead cockroaches that are on the floor of his cell from when he was eating them before, right? The guy that used to guard him, who plays the violin, his name is Victor, shows up and kind of tries to engage Negan and talk, and Negan's not really interested in talking. But Victor brings the violin into the cell, and then he tells Negan a story about being forced to learn the violin and how he hated most of the classical composers, but Bach is the one that really spoke to him. And this is interesting because this is what The Walking Dead always does, and it's very true to life, right? Once you get to know someone and what they care about, suddenly you care about them, right? So, obviously this happened on a very deep level with Beth and Daryl in Still, which, led to romantic feelings and everything, and that's not the case here, but still, this was Negan bonding with this guy, right? And this guy was kind of making Negan care about him as a person, right? And you can see it, that when this guy starts playing Bach, there's so much depth there and so much feeling because he's so passionate about the music of that composer that Negan feels it too and looks up at him, and you can see that they're kind of connecting over that. And of course, it shouldn't be lost on us, I don't think I need to tell you guys this, that there's the musical connection, right? The music is very moving and it's very pretty. And so we have a reminder of Beth, who is musical. Of course, she sang rather than playing instruments, but it's definitely there, and I have more to say about that in just a minute. But the other thing that I want to remind you of is that we actually heard a very famous Bach song in Daryl Dixon Season 2, and it was specifically the Cello Suite, which is a very, very well-known and popular song. If you listen to it, you'll recognize it. And it was played during a moment when it was very clear to me that they were foreshadowing Daryl's love life. It was when he fell into the water at the end of one episode, and then the next episode he came up out of the water, and he eventually goes and finds Isabel again. But he's listening to someone play that song on the cello, and then he sees a couple at a dinner table who are holding hands and eating together and clearly in a relationship. So it was obvious to me that they were there was music, which represents Beth, and then they were foreshadowing some sort of relationship for him, and that he, once again, is looking at a couple and wanting that for himself, right? Anyway, so obviously they didn't play the same song here with Negan, and maybe that's very purposeful because they wouldn't want to play the romance song here, otherwise it would, foreshadow a romance between Negan and Victor, which is clearly not what they're going for at all. But they played a different song from Bach, and the point is, Bach, we're seeing him both places. So I thought that was really interesting. So we have Negan who bonds with Victor, and then Victor says something really interesting. He says once he discovered Bach and that he loved Bach, he would just try to focus on Bach, and then that way he could get through what he called another shitty lesson. And so that actually becomes very much a theme for Negan for this episode, and maybe for this whole season, and that is just that he doesn't actually like where he is, and he doesn't actually like what he's doing, and he's really pretty miserable here. But he just has to focus on what does matter to him and what he can do, and then he'll get through the rest, and that's actually, it's a fairly big series-wide theme in The Walking Dead about, surviving versus living, but sometimes you have to survive first and get through the crappy stuff in order to get to a better life, right? And of course with Negan, his family is still being dangled like a carrot for him. And so I still am not sure if they actually have his family, if his family are actually coming, but he thinks they are. And so that's a big deal, right? He has to focus on them. He has to focus on doing the best he can, and of course surviving himself so that he can, hopefully get out and things will get better. So I thought that was really interesting as a theme. And then right after that, very subtle again, the camera goes back to the cockroaches and we see one of them moving. Now, you could definitely see this as a resurrection theme, because this cockroach is lying among the other dead cockroaches and is presumed dead, like it really should be dead, but then it starts moving, so it's not dead all the way yet. And I'm not saying it's going to come back to life or anything. It's a cockroach, but I just thought that was interesting. I was going, okay, what does that mean? And now, in conjunction with the theme, it might be a matter of, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what Rick said in 510, actually, which is the Music Box episode, but he told that whole story about his grandfather going to war and said, you basically have to pretend that you're dead and act like you're dead, get up and go to war, and that's how you survive, right? So you might almost see this as the cockroach playing dead, and maybe even Negan playing dead here, because, and dead doesn't mean literally dead, it means who he really is, his spirit is dead, because he's pretending to be this monster that he isn't anymore. It's clear that he's not the person he used to be, and where once upon a time he might have relished all of this, just like the Dama does, he's not that person anymore, and he doesn't like it anymore. So he's kind of pretending to be quote-unquote dead in order to get through this, right? So anyway, just really, really interesting symbolism there in that first scene. Okay, so then we shift to Maggie's group, and we see all of the constables who are leading her group talking about the plan. They're going to get in the ferry, they're going to go across the bay, they're going to put in at Pier 25, and then, what is her name? The main leader is Governor Bird, which is another bird symbol. They spell it B-Y-R-D, but still. And she says something about, they have to be prepared for engagement. And the colonel from season 1, he is a little bit disturbed by that, and he goes, well, wait a minute, we shouldn't be having engagement, this is going to be an exploratory mission. And she says, sure, but you never know, right? And I don't know, that almost made me think, and I'm not sure this is what they're going for, but it almost made me think that some people in this group actually are trying to get them all killed, or trying to run into the Croat, and they want to have a battle and an engagement. And we do have evidence later that somebody in the group is trying to signal the Croat, but I don't know if any of these leaders necessarily want that. It's either that they're doing it on purpose, or they're just very, very naive about what's happening here. Again, Maggie is not, so she's recognizing how much danger they're going into. But anyway, she arrives and they kick her out, and the colonel goes with her, and then she tells him all of her concerns, saying, trust me, he knows you're coming, even if he doesn't know exactly when. He knows, and he is prepared for you coming. She understands his psychology, and the fact that, the colonel got away. As soon as he got away, she says he would have been planning for you to come back. And, turns out she's very right about that. The other thing I noticed about this part, just a thought I had, was that a lot of these people, the leadership, like the governor and the governor's right-hand woman, whose name is, I'm not going to say it right, Narvaez? I think it's Narvaez. She's the one that really is tough and butts heads with Maggie and is the one who throws her in the cell. Anyway, they dress almost like they're in the Civil War. I don't know if anybody else notices this, but to me, that's what they look like in the way that they dress. And I'm not saying they actually are wearing Civil War clothes. You know, they're wearing more modern trench coats and things like that wouldn't be worn in the Civil War, but it's just reminiscent of that. And it's interesting because I think that's part of the war narrative, right? They're going to war, and so they have them dressed like a period of war history. Anyway, just something that occurred to me. So then we go back to Negan and the Croat, who are at the Dama's house, and the Croat has a plan to take out Maggie's boat. So she's very right. Like, they know they're coming. They can see them. So, like I said, the leadership are either being idiots because they don't understand this is what's happening, or they're purposely just want to engage. This part is also interesting because we start to get some more of the Dhammas Psychology. We have the Goya painting of Saturn eating his son, and she explains what it is, and it clearly disturbs Negan. And, I mean, rightfully so. That is a very famous painting. It is a classic. But it's disturbing, right? The subject matter is definitely disturbing. And not surprising, it's from Goya, if you know anything about Goya. But what the Dama says is that she thinks that Goya was a revolutionary. And the main reason she thinks that is because he didn't shy away from the ugliness. He was willing to take it head on as a subject of his painting, right? And so she sees that as a revolutionary and someone who moves them forward. And that's going to be really important by the end of the episode that she specifically sees that. So we understand that her psychology is that she believes that embracing brutality and the ugliness of the world is what will move them forward, and that's how you become a revolutionary. And if you're not doing that, she considers you someone to be not a revolutionary or someone that's actively holding them back. That's important. That's a pretty twisted psychology, because if you're not willing to be violent, basically she doesn't want to have anything to do with you. Anyone who shows kindness or compassion or mercy would be her enemy. So yeah, she's definitely a villain, if we hadn't figured that out already. Then she asks Negan about the Croat's plan, and he says it's a solid plan, but it's not a death blow. We do need to step it up. He says he wants to give them a 4th of July extravaganza. And the 4th of July reference jumped out at me as well. I can't remember if we've specifically had 4th of July references before, but I mean, the 4th of July in the United States, anyway, is Independence Day, which means we're celebrating freedom and the birth of our country, and that is very much tied to the American Revolution. So again, I think it's a war reference, but it's a reference about breaking free from, perceived tyranny kind of a thing. And so it's interesting that they use that reference. I will say that the Walking Dead writers use references to holidays a lot, and they use them very intentionally. So Negan says that they should give them something bigger, a 4th of July extravaganza, and erase any lingering doubts from anyone who hasn't chosen sides. So in terms of people who are already on the island, where the Dama is, and have not decided to join sides with her yet, or just kind of being neutral, they feel like this will also convince them finally to join her, because it'll be like a display of power. So one thing that I did notice here, too, is the Croat is definitely giving me Edwards vibes, as in Edwards from Grady. If you watch his body language and his expressions in this scene, he cares a great deal about the Dama's opinion of him, and he wants to be seen as intelligent and indispensable in her eyes. So he comes in with this plan, and she asks Negan. She wants Negan's opinion, and he doesn't like that very much. And then when Negan says all of that, the Croat, at first, he kind of smiles as though he's going to maybe scorn Negan's idea and laugh it off, but then he looks at the Dama and realizes that she is very, tuned in to what Negan is saying. So he shifts what he does, and he goes, oh, yeah, you know what? Negan is right. Me and Negan together, we're going to come up with this great idea, this great strategy that'll do all of these things we want it to do. So he does not want to be outdone or replaced by Negan. So it just kind of, I mean, in the sense that Negan could be paralleled with Beth, just because he's in a new place, he's behind enemy lines, he's being held captive, all of that, if this is his Grady, then obviously the Dama would be Don, and I think the Croat is Edward's. He very much cares what his place in the community is, and he doesn't want to be replaced by anybody. And because of that, he cozies up to Negan, and he talks to him, and he tries to banter with him, but his true loyalties are not with Negan, they're with the Dama. So that's something that, is interesting to keep in mind. So then we go back to Maggie. She tells Jenny that they kind of got off on the wrong foot at home, and she's here if Jenny needs anything. And then Jenny notices black smoke. So Maggie goes to investigate, and there are tires burning. She notices a white piece of fabric that probably helped start the fire, and just then Hershel shows up. So, I think I said last week that Hershel would show up. I think most of us probably figured that. And this is where he shows up, and Maggie's upset that he's there. But she also does tell him that the smoke is a signal. Clearly someone is signaling to the Croat. But then they are caught by the leadership and taken back to, the tent, and they just argue about it. Maggie's trying to tell them that he knows they're coming. They're walking into an ambush. They shouldn't be doing this. But, of course, nobody really listens to her. Even the Colonel, who seems to be more on Maggie's side than not, suggests they just go tonight and not wait, because he thinks that will give them the element of surprise. But obviously Maggie is not happy with that. She says that she's going to leave with her son, but Nevaez tells her that would be desertion. And then she gets mad and punches Nevaez for threatening Hershel, and that gets her jailed for insubordination. So things are not going well for Maggie, unfortunately. Then we have this part where the Croat and Negan and Victor, the violin guy, are all talking, and the Croat tells this story about how, back at the sanctuary at some point, Negan seemed to simply give in to an enemy they had and just, basically bow down to them, and even said that they were going to throw them a feast, and he made all of his people serve them. And the Croat said that most of the people at the sanctuary, Negan's, hardcore lieutenants and things, didn't like that at all. They felt like their tough leader had gone, and, what was he doing? But what he did is he ended up swapping out their meat and feeding them walker meat. And the Croat's point is that Negan protected them. And I don't know, I had to think about this for a while and figure out what the point of this story was. Feeding someone walker meat, that is definitely a theme we've seen before, so it's kind of interesting. But I think the point of this might have been in the strategy he used. So if he seemed to bow down to these people and throw them a feast, maybe it was a matter of he didn't think he could beat them if they went hand to hand. So he pretended to be their friends and to bow down and serve them, and then, ended up getting them to put their guard down by coming to this feast, and then he basically poisoned them with walker meat. And I'm assuming he did that because Negan was never one to, back down or do much that was low-key. He'd rather be in someone's face and be really theatrical about things. So I'm thinking that it was probably a matter of he didn't think he could beat them hand-to-hand, and so this is why he had to do it this way. And I'm assuming that we're going to see something like this at some point in the season. There's got to be a reason that they're telling us this, and it wasn't something that really played into this episode very much. So maybe it's a matter of this is how he'll kill the Dama. I don't know. This is how he'll take down this organization, something like that. I don't know, but that's just me guessing. I have no idea what it's going to be, but it was definitely an interesting story to hear. So then we have the scene where Maggie and Hershel are tied up, or handcuffed, I guess I should say, in the brig. The Colonel comes in and she tries to convince him to let them go and let everyone go. She's telling him everyone's going to die if you don't. You've got to listen to me, but he doesn't. And we just see that Hershel's being very kind of sullen and unresponsive to her. There's even a broken pipe above him, but she can't get him to acknowledge it or do much. So then we see that as the ferry grows nearer, Negan and the Croat and all of their people are actually watching it come toward them. So they're right there and they know what's going on. Maggie was 1,000% right about that. And we don't know exactly what they're doing yet at this point, what the plan is, but the Croat recites this poem about chemicals that when they are mixed create explosions that ends with a boom. And right about that time, the ferry hits one of the buoys, and the buoys are rigged with explosives. So we have all these explosions that are like hitting the boat as they go past them. Ginny, once that starts happening, there's a lot of chaos, so she grabs a toolbox and goes and releases Hershel and Maggie by sawing through the chains on their handcuffs, which is great. And Maggie gets Hershel to, focus on her, and, she apologizes and says, because Hershel, he gets upset and says, it's all my fault, I messed it all up, and she says, no, it wasn't, I just need you to focus, and I need you to help me. Okay, and so then they run out to get the lifeboat. They're going to get in the boat and get off the ferry, and there are some airborne explosives coming at them that hit the ferry, and they're actually walkers that are filled with the methane. So I was kind of laughing when I saw this part. They were taking walkers, putting like a hose in their mouth and filling them up with this stuff, and then taping over and like tarring over, and I don't know what it was, plastering over the face so that it wouldn't come out, and then they put the whole walker body in the cannon. So there are entire walkers full of methane flying through the air, hitting the boat and exploding. I mean, that's creative. It's extremely morbid, but it's creative. And I just kind of had to laugh and be like, all right, taking it to the next level, okay. So then it comes, kind of a big moment for Negan in looking through their scope. He can see Maggie and Hershel getting off the boat and onto the life raft. And when he sees them, he very clearly doesn't want to kill them. I was unclear about whether he saw Ginny or not. It didn't specifically show that he saw Ginny and knows she's there, but he saw Maggie, and I think he saw Hershel. So he obviously didn't want them to be hurt, so he told Victor to wait, and he hesitated before sending the next explosions until they were on the boat, and the boat was away from the ferry, the life, blow-up lifeboat. And then he sent the next explosion. So he really did save them, keep them from being hurt with that next explosion. Victor noticed, but more importantly, and unfortunately, the Croat noticed that he waited, that he hesitated and didn't send the explosion right away. So we see Maggie and the others reach land, so they're on the island now, and they see walkers. There was a part where the colonel got really, really sad, and I wasn't sure why, if he recognized one of the walkers, but it didn't really go into that. Maggie just said, okay, there's too many, we have to go. So then we get to the scene where Negan and the Croat are with the Dama again. They're in the church, and she's saying that she's very happy with how the battle went. She felt it was a total rout, and she knows that the war isn't over, but, she's just very pleased with the outcome. They bring in a guy named Benjamin Pierce. I didn't talk about him. He was on the boat with Maggie, and at one point we see him go over the side of the boat. One of the explosions hits, and he just kind of half jumps, half falls over the railing, and that was kind of the last we saw of him. He's somebody who, he's the same person that Hershel was talking to before, and he's really more of a journalist or a historian. He's trying to document things. So he's not there to be part of the army so much, and Hershel was talking to him about the bridge and what it looked like, and then drew him a picture of the bridge, right? Same guy. So because he went off the boat, we didn't really see him after that, and he didn't go up onto the shore with Maggie, but he gets brought into the Dama, so her people found him. And he tells her, that he's not part of the army. He shows her his notes to prove that he's a historian, and that's what he's doing there. Then the Dama says they have a loose end, and she wants to know who Negan was trying to spare. So again, this shows the Croats' loyalties. He immediately went to her and reported what happened with Negan, so he's not a friend to Negan. Not that we really thought he was, but definitely not. Then they bring in Victor, and at first I thought they were trying to say that Victor is the one that betrayed him and told the Dama, what he'd done, but that isn't what it was. She brought him in because she knew that Negan was close to him, and this also really tells us a lot about the Dhammas Psychology. There wouldn't be a whole lot of way for her specifically to know that Negan was close to Victor, that they had bonded or anything. It's because she is watching. She has people reporting, and it very well may just be the Croat. I mean, he was the one who came in at the beginning of the first episode and noticed the violin sitting there, so it's probably him, all the way around, who's just reporting on Negan. But anybody could be. She just has people reporting, so she knows what's going on, and you have to be careful with that. This is Negan learning that she knows exactly what's going on, even if she pretends to be his friend and pretends to, maybe not know. Yeah, she always knows. She's got people who report to her, and she knows what's going on. So she knows he's close to Victor. As soon as they bring him in, Negan can tell something's up. And he, at one point, jumps up and says, whatever you're angry with, take it out on me, not him, because he can just feel she's going to do something, right? But she compliments Victor, says he made a big impression on Negan, that he's cracked Negan's shell, and that's really hard to do. And then she asks him to play the violin, and he does. Because he can just feel her prowling around, like he can just feel the murderous, intentions rolling off her. He gets up and says, okay, I stalled because I saw a kid. And she said, a kid? And he goes, yeah, just some random kid. Obviously, he's not going to tell her. He knew who it was. And that kid didn't deserve to die. Her men kind of push him back into his seat, and she picks up a pen, which I believe belonged to Benjamin. And I knew as soon as she did that, I was like, she's going to stab this guy in the throat. She's going to kill him. And then she starts talking about Bach. And this is where it comes back to what she said about Goya, right? You have to kind of connect these two things. First, she says Bach is great, and he's, it's beautiful, and she's kind of just complimenting Bach in general, which, Bach is a classic composer, so something that most people would agree with. But then she says that Bach was not a revolutionary. He didn't do anything new. He just perfected what had come before. And that means that instead of pushing us forward, meaning like humanity, he took us back, and she was not interested in going back. Okay, guys, I feel like I could go really deep on this, and I won't speak for too long, but this is really important. Okay, first of all, it's just, again, showing her psychology, right? It's the exact same thing she said about Goya. Goya was a revolutionary because he embraced the ugliness and the brutality, and that in and of itself, depending on what you're doing with it, isn't bad, but she's talking about being violent. She's talking about killing people. She's talking about just being really, really brutal in the way Negan used to be brutal, in the way Negan was when he killed Glenn, right? And she believes that's revolutionary, and that's what's going to move humanity forward. Obviously, most of us and most of our good guys would not agree with that, right? They kill and they use violence when it's absolutely necessary to preserve themselves and the people they love, but it's not a great foundation for moving humanity forward. Quite the opposite, right? So she says this about Bach, and who knows if she actually even thinks this is true of Bach. She was saying it as a reason to kill Victor, right? Which she does. And it's really aimed at Negan. She's saying that because he hesitated, because he showed mercy to someone, that's not moving them forward. That's moving them back, or at least she believes that. And so, as a punishment, she killed Victor because she knew Negan had bonded with Victor. And poor Negan, like, this was really, really tragic. But the other thing that I just can't help but side-eye here is that she says specifically that Bach is about the past. And that just screams Beth to me. If this is what they're saying, like, and it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not, whether you agree with this philosophy of Bach's music or not, that's not the point. But if this is what they're kind of symbolizing for when they use Bach as a symbol, then think about that scene in Daryl Dixon season 2 when he was listening to the Bach song. At the time, I was thinking it was a Beth reference anyway, just because it was musical, right? So he's hearing music, and then he sees this couple. And, the couple thing, we saw that more than once. We saw it when, I'm forgetting the other character's name who stayed behind, and he saw them holding hands, and we compared it to Beth and Daryl's handhold in Alone, right? We see him looking at couples quite a few times, and it's just a way to show that this is what he's looking for, and he wants companionship for himself, right? But the point is, he's looking at this couple, and we hear music, and I was going, okay, they didn't have to do the music. They could have just showed him looking at the couple. They didn't have to do the music. The music screams Beth to me that the woman he's going to come together with, who's going to be his soulmate, is musical. But this adds a layer to it now, because it was specifically Bach, and the Dama is telling us that the Bach is about the past, which suggests that the woman he's going to be with is someone from his past. It's not going to be someone new that we haven't met yet. You see what I mean? So this was super interesting. Like I said, I feel like I could talk about this for a while. And, that's the basic gist of it. But really interesting. And I had fun with this one. I had fun dissecting this. Unfortunately, she does kill Victor, which I was sad about. I really liked Victor. I thought he was cool. And, in a way, that's a little bit of a Beth replay, because the musical person in the Grady situation got killed, apparently. And, of course, we believe that Beth really did live. But in a way, it also parallels again, if we take a different aspect and say that Negan is Beth in this situation, then Victor would be Trevitt. Remember, Edwards had her kill Trevitt, and Beth just didn't like that, right? It was just not good, and she felt like he used her to kill Trevitt, and he did it in order to maintain his status in Dawn's eyes, because he didn't want another doctor there who might be able to, like, usurp his role. Well, this is very similar, okay? The Croat didn't kill Victor, himself with his hand. Neither did Negan, but the Croat reporting on Negan is what got Victor killed. So indirectly, the Croat, who is, like I said, he's kind of in Edwards' role, he did get this person killed. And Negan didn't like that. That was difficult for him, right? And then the really interesting thing that really cements the Croat as Edwards in this situation for me is what the Dama says to him afterwards. She goes up to him, and in this, like, really twisted, intimate sort of gesture, she leans down and whispers in his ear and says, "You did good. You did very, very good." I mean, it just feels like he's her puppy or something. You know what I mean? Like, she's patting him on the head like good dog or something. But the point is, this is why he's loyal to her. The Croat is not, I mean, he's, originally Negan said the problem with him is that he's very brutal. Like, he doesn't mind torturing even children and things. So he's very brutal, but he's not terribly intelligent. He's, he's intelligent in the sense that he has managed to survive. And I think he's the kind of guy that latches on to the most powerful person and sucks up to them so that he can survive. And he's made that work for him. He is still alive, but, the Dama is infinitely more intelligent, more manipulative, more evil, and she is keeping him close as one of her informers so that she can maintain her power, right? So really interesting villain dynamic going on here. And just that scene was, it was heart-wrenching, but it was really beautifully done. And actually, something that I noticed when I was going back to get screenshots is that they even show Victor fall with his arm out to one side, which is very reminiscent of when Beth fell with her arm out. So I'll put those two screenshots side by side. They're definitely mirroring this. No way that's an accident, guys. So then we go back to Maggie's group, and this was another thing that I thought was pretty interesting. Maggie sees Hershel helping one of the other people there bandage her leg. He just, like, wraps gauze around this woman's leg. And Maggie seems, like, genuinely shocked. Okay, Hershel has so much of Beth in him, not only because he's artistic, and he's more quiet, and he's more introverted, and all of those things, but now we have this healer kind of thing. Like, nobody asked him to do that, and we haven't seen that he has any medical training, but just as Beth, became Edward's assistant at Grady, Hershel has an aptitude for healing people, and that's how he comforts them and makes them feel better. So he's not so much a warrior like Maggie is on the front lines. He's much more like Hershel, his grandfather, and like Beth. And then it was really sweet. He came over, and once again, I just want to slap Maggie upside the head sometimes. I mean, I love her as a character, but she's just not very nurturing to her son. And I don't think she really knows how to be. So I try not to be too judgy of her. But literally, Hershel was trying so hard to bond with her. And I was thinking in my head, Maggie, just put your damn arm around your kid, And then he hugged her. And then she kind of hugged him back. I mean, I don't think she really put her arm around him. But it was a sweet bonding moment between them. He said that he loved her, and he was just really glad she was okay. And it was a good moment between them, but I do wish that Maggie could figure out how to be a little bit more nurturing. Jenny sees a gun in her pack. Nothing really came of that, but I'm assuming it will be important probably next episode. Then they hear an engine, and they decide to get up and move, and they head into Central Park. And I knew that Central Park was going to play a big part in one of the episodes. I'm assuming it's episode 3, so that'll be interesting to see. Oh, the other thing, I mentioned at the beginning that I had more to say about this, and this was just some, like a random thought I had while I was watching it. Specifically while I was watching that final scene where the Dama kills Victor, I was thinking that Negan has become a lot like Merl. And I don't mean necessarily in who he is or, his personality or anything like that, but in the sense that at this point in the story, Negan isn't really a villain anymore. He definitely was back in season, 6, 7, 8, but he's not really a villain anymore. He is an antagonist in the sense that he and Maggie are at odds, and he's often at odds with different, our different beloved characters and everything. But he's not as evil as he used to be, right? We have bigger villains now than him, like the Dama. So he's an antagonist, but not a villain, and we see him being very calmed by music. And that's very much how Merl was. I've mentioned this many times, but in season 3, one of my favorite scenes, it was, I always forget the episode number. It's the episode right before Clear, I believe, because at the end of it, Rick is talking about going out, and that's when he finds Morgan. But it's when Beth starts singing the Tom Waits song in the evening in the prison. They're all inside the prison, and she starts singing. And, of course, Daryl's staring at her. We all know that. But then Merl comes out and stares at her. And he was, hanging out in one of the cells in the darkness by himself because he's very much like the black sheep of the group. A lot of them don't like him at this point and have not accepted him into the group. And so he's just hanging out by himself back there, And when she starts singing, he comes out of that cell and he watches her sing. And so I've always said I thought that was so sweet. I don't think personally that, Merl was in love with Beth or anything, although I know that there are, headcanons and fan fictions about that. I think it's more that the Dixon boys did not grow up with music, and they're both very, very mesmerized by it. And that's sweet. I love that. And I kind of feel like Negan has kind of reached that point, too, where he's still an antagonist. He's still very rough around the edges at times, right? But he's not our biggest villain. He's not evil like he used to be. And something about the music calms him. And that's just interesting to me. I really, really like that. So, all right, I've been going for a while. So, yeah, these are my thoughts about this episode. Let me know what you thought of it. And I will get some more Ask videos out later in the week. Have fun, guys.